What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Oak Tree Football channel, and welcome back to another one of my college football top 25. So, week 8 of the college football has just ended a few days ago on Saturday, and today, right before week 9 starts, I'm going to be bringing you guys my top 25. So, it was a pretty big week because both the Big Ten and Mountain West returned this week. There were some very big upsets, some very good top 25 matchups as well. It was a very entertaining week. A lot of the games, there were some closer games than expected. It was just a fun game, or a fun week to watch. So without further ado, I'm going to get into my top 25. Now, first at number 25, I have Boise State. Now, Boise State, of course, just played their first game of the season because they are a Mountain West team. And I was considering putting Boise State out of not in the top 25. It was between them and Oklahoma for me. But I decided that they looked good enough in that first game to just about get in. Oklahoma has 2 losses this year, even though Boise State's only played 1 game. They don't have any losses yet. And Oklahoma hasn't looked great every game, and Boise State looks pretty good on Saturday against Utah State. They had a big win, 42-13. They definitely were the better team, and they looked good, and one of the better teams in the Mountain West through week 1, and I have the feeling that they will stay as a top 25 team for, a few more weeks. They do have some interesting games coming up. They do have Air Force, who did lose this week. And then they have ranked BYU, which should be a fun one in 2 weeks. But at number 24, I have USC. Now, USC is one of the few teams on this list that is still yet to play. USC, the only reason I have them at 24 is because they haven't played yet. I think they're more talented than 24, and I think if they had played a few games and they had, those games had gone as I would expect them to, they would be a few spots higher, probably a top 20 team. But just because of the lack of games, I'm going to put them at 24. USC, definitely in my opinion, is going to be good this season. Pac-12 is only playing a 6-game schedule, but in my opinion, they're definitely one of the favorites to make it to the conference championship. There are some other teams that, could make a good push, such as Arizona State, Utah, and then on the other side, you got Oregon and maybe even California. But USC, definitely one of the better teams in the Pac-12 in my opinion. And once they do start playing games, they'll probably move up in the top 25. At number 23, I have SMU. Now, SMU did lose this week. But the reason I don't have them falling out of the rankings is because they were playing a ranked team, and a pretty good ranked team at that. They were playing a top 10 team in Cincinnati in both my rankings and in, the official rankings, so I really can't move them down too much. I was very high on SMU so far this season. I really liked what they've done. I believe I had them at number 15. So they moved down 8 spots after a loss against a ranked team. They did end up getting destroyed. The final score was 42-13. I think the game was closer than the score showed, but Cincinnati definitely deserved to win, and I do think SMU deserves to fall down a few spots in the rankings. But I still think they deserve to be in the top 25. We'll see if they can bounce back this week against Navy, and then they only have 4 more games after that, so only 5 games left this season for them. Let's see if they can make a potential push to the American Athletic Championship. At number 22 of Iowa State. Iowa State, just like SMU, did lose this week, but they did lose to a top 10 ranked team, that being Oklahoma State. It was a pretty good game. I watched a lot of it. They only lost by 3. However, Brock Purdy didn't play great, but Breece Hall, the running back. Breece Hall's having an incredible season. I thought he was one of the best running backs in college football, one of the more underrated running backs in college football. He's just been incredible this season. So Iowa State sitting at 3-2. Their chances of making the Big 12 championship game are a little less likely now, but they still have a chance, no doubt. So we'll see how they bounce back this week against Kansas, who they should beat. At 21, I have Liberty. I had Liberty just making it in the top 25 last week at number 25, and they impressed me this week as well. I think they were good. They had a big win. I think offensively they were really good. I believe they put up 56 points. Defensively, they allowed maybe a bit more than they should have, but I still think they played a good game. They definitely were the better team. They got a big win. As they continue to move up in my rankings above Iowa State, SMU, and USC. Now moving on to number 20 to 16. At number 20, I have Coastal Carolina. Coastal Carolina, I had them getting in my top 25 last week, and this week they had another pretty big win that saw them move up to number 20 in my rankings. They had a win against Georgia Southern, who Georgia Southern has been a pretty solid team this year, and I think it was definitely a good win. Like I said, Georgia Southern has been pretty good, so in the last 2 games they've beaten a ranked Louisiana and a solid Georgia Southern team. That's definitely good. They moved up to number 20 in my rankings. They have a game against Georgia State coming up. We'll see how they do there. At number 19, I have Indiana. Notice that they are 1 spot behind Penn State, which I'll talk about Penn State in a second. But Indiana, of course, got that huge upset win against Penn State. And I'm gonna do these Penn State and Indiana ones at the same time. The reason I have Penn State above Indiana is because Penn State outplayed Indiana. They had hundreds of more yards. I think Penn State, in a sense, Penn State deserved to win this game. I think Indiana did a great job, though, and in a way they deserve to. There was that extremely controversial ending. Went to overtime. Penn State scored first. Indiana scored, went for 2. And the ref said they got it, which I don't think you can say the decision was wrong, but it was very close, and I think you could definitely make the argument that it should have gone the other way. But definitely a good win for Indiana. They definitely deserve to jump up in the top 25. I just think Penn State was the better team. I'm going to keep Penn State 1 spot ahead of them because I think Penn State's more talented overall. That could easily change, though. I like Indiana this year coming into the season. So far in the season, I think they're going to be good this year. Maybe they'll, be better than Penn State. I'm not so sure about that yet, but it was definitely a big win. We'll have to see how they match up against Rutgers and then Michigan in 2 weeks. Next up, obviously Penn State had that big loss. Not going to say much because I talked about it a little bit. Playing Ohio State this weekend, which is going to be a tough one. I still think Penn State's a good team. I think they deserve to be in the top 25, no doubt. If they can get a win against Ohio State, that would be huge. I do have them 1 spot ahead of Indiana. I know some people aren't going to agree with that, but I do think, they deserve to be there, and that may change if they lose this week to Ohio State. At number 17, I have Marshall. I've been extremely impressed with Marshall this season. They remain undefeated. Their game this week was a bit closer against FAU. They are Marshall. But I definitely think they still were the better team. They're getting the passing attack and the rushing attack going. They were only able to put up 20 points, only going into the end zone twice, but they only allowed 9. Only 1 touchdown they allowed, which is very, very good. I think Marshall's looking like a very good team this year. I have them up into the top 20 at number 17, and at number 16, I have Kansas State. Now, Kansas State got a huge win this week against Kansas. They absolutely destroyed them, which was expected, but they were fantastic in that game. I know it's against Kansas, but still, I think they showed that they deserve to be a top 25 team. Since that early loss this season, Kansas State has been fantastic. They, of course, lost to Arkansas State in their first game. They've won every game since that, including against number 3, Oklahoma. They've just looked really good in a lot of games. I think their defense has been solid this season, and they've gotten some things going on offense as well. I think Kansas State is looking like a very good team right now and could make it to the Big 12 championships. One of the favorite, or to the Big 12 championship. They are one of the favorites to do so right now. Moving into the top 15. At number 15, I have Oregon. Oregon is my highest ranked team that has yet to play a game. Of course, the Pac-12 will be kicking off in a few weeks. Similar to USC, the only reason I have Oregon this low is because they haven't played a game yet. Still, it would be hard to put them over some of the teams that I have currently above them. But we'll have to see when they start playing. Oregon have had a few opt-outs, which is going to hurt them this season, but they're still a very solid team in my opinion and should have a good year. Potentially, they can win the Pac-12 this season. At number 14, I have Michigan. Michigan had a huge win this week against ranked Minnesota. Definitely a deserving win. They're fantastic in that game. They just looked really, really good. Now, Joe Milton, he didn't play great, but he did what he needed to do. Didn't turn the ball over. Was able to lead the team pretty well. He was solid as a runner, had 1 touchdown on the ground. He had 1 touchdown through the air as well. Michigan's looked the better team. The running attack looked great. Charbonnet had a touchdown. Haskins had 2. They didn't have any players over 100 rushing yards, but they had 250-plus rushing yards total, I do believe. Their defense looks solid. They only allowed 24 points against a good Minnesota team. Obviously, this was Minnesota's first game. Maybe Minnesota isn't very good this year. I do not think that is the case. Minnesota, even though they are losing some talent, they still have a good head coach, a good quarterback, a good wide receiver, good running back, and a solid defense. Minnesota should be good this year. And Michigan just played great. The only reason I have them at 14 is because I didn't have them in my rankings before this, and I didn't want them to go, from unranked to a top 10 team. I just don't think that sounds very realistic, and I just don't think that makes sense. But they were definitely impressive, and they're definitely going to be a team to keep an eye on this season. At number 13, I have Miami. Miami got another win this week against Virginia. It wasn't the best win. They won by 5 points, only put up 19, but their defense looked solid, only allowed 14 points. De'Ara King had a pretty solid game, over 300 passing yards, no interceptions, did only throw 1 touchdown, but that's still solid. Their running game has impressed me at times this season. And their passing game looked pretty good against Virginia. Virginia hasn't been great this year. They've only won 1 game. But still a pretty well-deserved win for Miami this week. I have them at number 13. At number 12, I have North Carolina. And a lot of people are saying North Carolina should stay where they were heading into this week, but I don't think so. I think they should move up. They were able to beat a ranked team in NC State. It was a very big win, too. Obviously, they still do have that loss to unranked Florida State on their resume, which isn't going to help them out if they're up there as one of the playoff contenders. But I definitely think this was a huge win against NC State. NC State has been very impressive this season, and North Carolina just were the better team all the way through. Sam Howell had 250-plus passing yards. They got the running game going again. They've been great in the running game this season. I believe they had over 300 yards and 5 rushing touchdowns. They put up 48 points, which is great for them. De'Ami Brown had over 100 receiving yards. North Carolina's offense, just in my opinion, has been one of the best, and their defense played pretty well as well. They got 3 total interceptions, and they only allowed 21 points. Big win for UNC. I think they go up to 12. At number 11, I have Wisconsin. I was very close to putting Wisconsin in the top 10. I do have them at 11, but it was still a huge win for Wisconsin. Graham Mertz played out of his mind, the backup quarterback. Threw 5 touchdowns, 1 incompletion. However, Wisconsin, their original starting quarterback, Jack Cohen, injured, not playing. Graham Mertz tested positive for COVID-19. He will not be playing, and their backup quarterback their third-string quarterback also tested positive for COVID-19, so he will not be playing most likely, which means Wisconsin is probably going to be down to their 4th-string quarterback this week against Nebraska, and then potentially the week after against Purdue, who looked good. That's not going to be good for them at all, especially considering their running game didn't look great. But I still think Wisconsin's a solid team. Very close to putting them in the top 10. Decided to leave them just outside. But Wisconsin's looking good at the moment. I've been moving 5 spots to number 11. Moving into the top 10. At number 10, I have BYU. BYU impressed me again this week with a big win. BYU has just been playing fantastic this season. And they had a huge win against Texas State. Maybe this game was a little bit closer than the score showed, but it was definitely a deserving win for BYU. Zach Wilson played incredible again, 4 touchdown passes, nearly 300 yards. He's been one of the best in the country this season. He was solid as a rusher, I do believe, also. The receiving game is looking good for BYU. Their defense is looking good. They were playing Texas State, but Texas State has been solid this season. All their games have been close, except for this one. They destroyed them. They've had some big wins this season. Unfortunately for them, their game against Army, one of their games that was supposed to happen, Army team that is looking very good at the moment, was postponed. If they had, earlier in the season, that wasn't very recent, but a few weeks ago that was postponed. If they had that game and they won, they could potentially be even higher. And then in a couple weeks, they play against ranked Boise State. That's definitely going to be a very interesting game. And if they win that game, especially if it's a big win, maybe we see BYU in the playoff this year. That'll be very interesting. But BYU will look good again. For me, they're a top 10 team. At number 9, I have Florida. Florida didn't play this week, didn't play the week before either. But they are coming up with a game against Missouri this weekend. I expect them to win that. And I think they're a solid team. I think they've been good this year. I think Kyle Trask has been very good. Their offense has played great. Unfortunately, they did have that loss to Texas. Unfortunately for them, they did have that loss to Texas A&M last time on the field. But still, Florida's looking good this season, in my opinion, still a top 10 team. At number 8, I do have the team they lost to last time out, Texas A&M, moving down one spot. Texas A&M didn't play this weekend, but so far this season they've looked good. They barely beat Vanderbilt first, which wasn't great. They lost to Alabama, pretty big loss as well. But the past 2 weeks, or the past 2 games, they've beaten Florida, number 4 Florida, and they beat Mississippi State. They're looking good right now. I've had number 8 in the country. Potentially they can sneak in the college football playoff. Kellen Mond is playing pretty well right now. At number 7, I have Cincinnati. Cincinnati got a big win against a ranked SMU team this week. It was a huge win. Cincinnati had been good before this, but I wasn't really sure. I wasn't completely sold on them, but they showed me that they are very good this season. And yeah, I think this is a very good team, definitely a top 10 team. If any group of 5 schools is going to make the playoff, it's going to be Cincinnati. Cincinnati's looking very good this season. I do believe they're ranked 7 in the official rankings as well. They have a big game against Memphis this weekend, though. If they can win that, maybe they can be a top 5 team, and by the end of the season, if they win out, including the American Athletic Championship game, Cincinnati could be making the playoffs, which is very interesting. At number 6, I have Oklahoma State. It was hard not moving Oklahoma State up because they beat a ranked team to stay undefeated. But there are a few teams that I believe are better than them, which is why I have them at 6. Still, they look good. Chuba Hubbard had a solid game, in my opinion. He had over 130 rushing yards, and I think he was solid in the receiving game as well. He only did make 1 catch, but it was for a pretty big gain. Spencer Sanders came back. He did throw 2 interceptions, also threw a touchdown. I do feel like that's kind of expected, though, since he hasn't played in a while. I think he can change that. The defense played really good, in my opinion. Talon Wallace had a good game. Oklahoma State just looked good overall, especially offensively, but also defensively, they look good. I think Oklahoma State, if any Big 12 team is going to make the playoffs, it's probably going to be Oklahoma State. They're looking very good at the moment. Moving into the top 5, at number 5, I have Notre Dame. Now, I know some people may not agree with this one because Notre Dame's coming off a big loss, but a very, very big win, against Pittsburgh. But in my opinion, Notre Dame hasn't looked incredible this season, which is why I just don't feel like putting them higher than the teams ahead of them, obviously. They've been good, no doubt. If they keep winning the way they did, they'll be moving higher. But they're coming up with a game against Georgia Tech this week. But in 2 weeks, they have to play Clemson, number 1 in the nation currently. That's going to be an interesting game, no doubt. If they win that game, they're probably going to make it to the college football playoff. If they lose, that's really going to hurt their chances. So we'll have to see what happens then. But Notre Dame's looking good. Their rushing attack's looking very solid. Their defense is looking like one of the best in the nation. Ian Book had a good game this weekend. Running game wasn't as good as it has been, but still, huge win for Notre Dame. Moving on to number 4, I have Georgia. Now, some people may think Georgia should be below Notre Dame, but I think Georgia should stay ahead of them. I have Georgia last week. I had Georgia at number 3. They moved down 1 spot after not playing this week. They're currently sitting at 3-1 after that big loss to Alabama. But I think Georgia just looked better than Notre Dame overall this season. Sure, Georgia has that loss, but Notre Dame hasn't played a top 2 team in the nation, arguably top 3 team in the nation. Arguably even the best team in the nation. Notre Dame hasn't played that. I believe Notre Dame hasn't played a ranked opponent yet this season. And they still struggled. They struggled at times against Louisville. They had some struggles against Florida State. And they had some struggles against Duke. Georgia really, they struggled early against Arkansas. But other than that, Georgia really hasn't struggled too much this season. And it was very close between Georgia and Notre Dame. But I do think Georgia deserves to be 1 spot ahead of Notre Dame. Moving into the top 3, all these 3 teams have been great this season so far. At number 3, I have Ohio State. Ohio State looked fantastic this weekend. I couldn't put them any higher because they've only played 1 game, but they looked great against Nebraska. Justin Fields had a near-perfect game, only threw 1 incompletion. A few touchdowns along with that. One thing that really surprised me about them, Master Teague looked like he was going to be the main running back. Especially early, Master Teague was getting a lot of carries. Trey Sermon got some later in the game, but it was kind of how I expected at the end. Both of them got over 10 carries, but Master Teague got more. They seem to be more focused on getting him the ball earlier in the game, which I was a bit surprised with. Teague did have 2 touchdowns. Fields had a rushing touchdown and 2 passing touchdowns. The receiving game looked good. Garrett Wilson, Chris Olave both had good games. Jackson Smith and Jigba made one of the best catches I've ever seen in college football. It was incredible. Maybe not one of the best I've ever seen, but probably the best this season. He's a freshman. He looked very good. He only made 2 catches, but one of them was an incredible touchdown. Ohio State's defense looked good. Looks like a good team overall. The offensive line, in my opinion, wasn't great, but overall, they played very good. Top 3 team, in my opinion. At number 2, I have Alabama still. Alabama had a very, very big win this week against Tennessee. Now, Tennessee hasn't been all that great this season, but Alabama was just incredible. They were definitely the better team. Mac Jones didn't throw any touchdowns, but he did have 380-plus passing yards, I believe. The running game looked good. Mac Jones had a rushing touchdown. Najee Harris had 3. Najee Harris is having a fantastic season. John Mechie Jr. or John Mechie III had a big game. Also, over 150 receiving yards. However, one thing that is going to hurt Alabama this season is Jalen Waddle is out for the year. He's one of the best receivers on this team, and maybe in college football, that's definitely going to hurt them. They're going to hope that they, Mechie and Devonta Smith can play well in his place because he was definitely one of the better players on this team. But at number 1, I have Clemson. Clemson did struggle a little bit this week against Syracuse, but they pulled away at the end. Clemson, in my opinion, is still the best team in the nation. Trevor Lawrence didn't look incredible this week, but it wasn't a bad game at all. He did throw 1 interception, nearly 300 yards, and 2 touchdowns. Travis Etienne had 3 rushing touchdowns. This team just looked pretty good. I mean, they did struggle earlier, but they were able to figure some things out, stay at number 1. They've definitely been great the 2 games before this. They had the win against number 7 Miami and then the huge win against Georgia Tech. This game, wasn't as pretty as it has been, but it's still a win. It doesn't always matter about how pretty it is. It's a big win for them, coming up with a game against a solid Boston College team. Then that Notre Dame game. After that, they should win out, except for maybe against Virginia Tech. But that Notre Dame game is going to be interesting. But Clemson, one of the best teams in the nation, in my opinion, the best team in the nation. So that is my top 25 through 8 weeks of college football. Clemson stays on top. So right now, if the college football playoff, if the season ended right now, Clemson, Alabama, Ohio State, and Georgia would make the playoffs. And that's going to do it for this video. If you guys did enjoy, don't forget to leave a like. And if you are new around here, feel free to subscribe for more NFL and college football content. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed. And I will see you guys in the next video.